History is all around us. There are secrets of our past around every corner, hidden in our street names, buried under our feet. And in this series, I'm going to be uncovering these secrets by exploring Britain's most historic towns. This is the original Roman. And I want to discover which towns across the UK can claim to reveal the most about each period in British history. It is terrifying. I'll be deciphering clues in familiar landscapes, bringing lost landmarks back to life, and peeling away the layers to reveal a unique view of these towns in all their former glory. Oh, look at this, look at this. From the Vikings to the Victorians, the Romans to the Tudors, I'll reveal the story of an era through the story of a single town. This week, I'm travelling back almost 2,000 years to visit Britain's most Roman town. A town with one of the biggest, most spectacular Roman monuments.
You tie an animal in the middle of the arena to be baited.
The largest Roman fortress in the country. I hadn't expected it to be anywhere near this big. And a place which holds an extraordinary secret. So you've got this strange elliptical building. What's going on? If you really want to understand Roman Britain, this is a great place to be. Chester. In 43 AD, the Emperor Claudius invaded Britain in a very obvious demonstration of his military might. An army of 40,000 men took control of the south and made Colchester the capital. Then they set out to defeat the hostile tribes of the north. In 74 AD, they built a northern stronghold, an outpost to suppress uprisings on the fringes of the empire. The site they chose is what we now know as Chester. Today, Chester is less well known as a military stronghold, but armies of tourists still come to visit its two-storey medieval rows, the Eastgate Tower, its meandering city walls, the cascading weir on the River Dee, and the Rudi, the oldest racecourse in Britain. And this is where my search for the Romans starts.
Hats off to Larry, who continues to show the way.
It's Ladies' Day at Chester Racecourse. Today it's all about the women. They're coming here to watch the horse racing, but also to be seen, of course. But nearly 2 millennia ago, this place attracted over 5,000 Roman men. And the reason they came here is hidden at the racecourse. To find out more, I'm joined by archaeologist Caroline Pudney. Caroline, why did the Romans come here?
It's a really key strategic location for the Roman army. The racecourse, as it is now, is very, very different to what it was like in the 1st century AD. And one clue to that is hidden actually just over there behind you, Alice, where we've got the base of a cross in the open course area.
Yeah, I think I can see it just there.
So that's the base of an early medieval cross. Now, the Rudi, the name of the racecourse, is what gives it away, really. The early medieval word rud for cross and I for island. We've got the island of the cross, suggesting that this wasn't terra firma.
A much more watery place than it is today.
A much more watery place.
If we go back further than the Middle Ages, to the time of the Romans, the ground level here was 6 metres lower, and this site looked very different.
This whole racecourse would have been largely underwater in the 1st century AD.
So these horses would have been splashing around the racecourse?
Yes, indeed they would have been.
A clue to what the Romans did here first emerged in the 19th century. Builders unearthed remains of what appeared to be a substantial Roman jetty, protruding from where the grandstands are today, suggesting that this was once the site of a large harbour. It's hard to picture ships docking here today. Chester is 10 miles from the coast. To understand how this landscape has changed over 2,000 years, we need to take to the skies. Aerial archaeologist Ben Robinson has been studying the geography of the rivers and the coastline in this part of the country.
If we want to understand what the Romans saw in the place, we have to try and see it through their eyes, and the advantage of height will give us an insight.
We can see the course of the River Dee as it travels to the coast. This is a river which deposits a lot of sediment, and this has a big effect on the landscape. From up here, you can see evidence of this everywhere.
This huge salt marsh is basically building up and encroaching on the estuary, choking it up. Places that were formerly right on the coast are now almost landlocked. That's Parkgate down there. That used to be a port and a harbour. Now look at it.
And this is exactly what happened to Chester at what's now the racecourse.
If we look at the river around Chester now, we can see that it sweeps around the racecourse. But if we go back to Roman times, this river was much, much wider and it covered the whole racecourse. It was effectively the mouth of the estuary. Chester was on the coast, and it's no accident that the first legion to be sent here had naval origins. They were sent to build a harbour.
It's incredible to think that Chester once looked out to sea, and the ships of the Roman fleet could have sailed right up to where the racecourse is today. Using archaeological records, we're able to strip back 2,000 years of silt and rebuild the Roman harbour. A jetty protrudes out into the deeper part of the river. The large ships of the British fleet of the Imperial Navy, the Classis Britannica, can sail right up here to dock. Provisions from all over the Empire arrive on these ships to supply the thousands of soldiers now stationed across Britain. The Romans may have had grand plans for Britain, but they faced a major obstacle up here at the far northwestern corner of the empire. The natives weren't exactly welcoming. And long before Chester was a town, it was an outpost of the Roman army. Chester was first and foremost a military fortress built to house 5,500 soldiers. And what's amazing about it is that the walls of the fortress still provide the outline of the city centre today. Two sides of the city walls, the north and the east, follow the exact lines of the original Roman fortress. Parts of the walls are remarkably well preserved, but the most impressive sections are out of reach and quite difficult to see. Morning.
Morning.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Very good. Are you Keith?
Keith, yeah.
Keith.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jason.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, all right? Good.
So you're going to help me get a closer look at these Roman walls then?
Yeah, for sure.
I do need to abseil to get a closer look because this upper bit is much later. But below that cornice, I can't really see it from here. These are some of the best Roman walls in Britain. So I'm really excited about getting over the edge and having a better look down there. And it's a lovely morning for it. I can't believe it.
There you go, so if you lean back. There you go. Perfect.
Excellent.
All right.
So I'm down onto the Roman wall. This is fantastic. The wall changes completely as you get down here. So I've come away from those smaller, later blocks up there, and as soon as you get below this cornice, you're onto these fantastically big blocks. I mean, some of them are wider than a metre across. They are huge. Imagine how heavy they are. They go right from the bottom there, right up here to this cornice level, and that really marks the top of the Roman wall, or at least where the walkway would have been on the other side. Imagine the Roman soldiers patrolling up and down here of a morning. 10 fortresses were built across the land to enforce the rule of the empire. For speed, they were originally thrown up in earth and timber, and then the sites which faced the biggest threats were later rebuilt in stone. The fortress in Chester was the largest. You look at this and just imagine what it must have been like for the local inhabitants when the Romans arrived and put up this enormous fortress. This is unusually monumental architecture. It's perhaps the sort of thing you'd expect to see more in, I don't know, a triumphal arch, a temple, something like that. They wanted people to know who was boss quite clearly. Blisters. Just to prove I've done some work this morning. Seeing the scale of these walls, I really get a sense of the threat that these Romans were facing. Fortunately, the more recent Latin occupants of the wall seem a bit less intimidating. You've got an Italian flag on your side.
Yes, indeed, I do have.
Where are you from?
From Sicily. How
Are you?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes, I've just appeared over the wall here and I've been inspecting some of the work of your ancestors. Do you feel a connection with that kind of Roman past?
Yeah, I
The fact that you're, you know, the Romans were here 2,000 years ago.
Chester. I love the walls, especially the walls. That's why I'm here. Chestrian people are fantastic, and some of them must have some old Roman blood in them. You know, we must have left something good.
I want to ask you something. The old Roman name for Chester, which you must know, how would you say it? Deva. That's how you'd say it as an Italian.
You know, but Deva sounds more right to me.
Sounds more authentic.
Yeah.
I'll go with that then.
Fine, go for Deva.
The full name for Roman Chester was Deva Victrix. Deva, or possibly Diva, from the local river Dee, and Victrix, meaning victory or conquered. What's left of the stone wall of the fortress of Deva Victrix above ground is certainly imposing. But hidden away underground is something even more impressive. If you want to find out about the Romans in Britain, then Chester is quite possibly the best place to be. The 1st and 2nd centuries AD were a time of conquest and defence for the Romans in this outpost of empire. Chester has the most complete circuit of Roman fortress walls of any city in Britain, and what survives from almost 2,000 years ago is quite incredible. But there is something missing. A Roman fortress should have a gatehouse in each of its 4 walls. But these gates are 18th century. All traces of the Roman gatehouses seem to have completely disappeared. At least that's how it looks on the surface. Engineers have just been carrying out work on a 19th century section of the city wall, and they've made a remarkable discovery. The site is completely fenced off from the public, but archaeologist Lee Dodd is about to let me see behind the scenes.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too. I've just been abseiling off the walls down there.
Excellent.
That was exciting.
You're going to need these.
Oh yeah, okay. So I'm now officially a member of your team.
Would you like to take a look?
I'd love to. When Lee and his team started investigating the foundations of the 19th century walls, they discovered the work of much earlier engineers. Huge, great blocks. Now, I've seen blocks like this before when I was abseiling.
Absolutely. This is particularly exciting, really. What we have before us are the foundation blocks to the north gate to the fortress. There would have been 2 towers, and this is the west wall of the west tower. We've got the east wall of it over there as well, so we've been able to fix the dimensions around about 7 metres wide.
This is a huge gatehouse. I hadn't expected it to be anywhere near this big.
It's a monumental structure.
The size of these foundations provides us with important clues to the massive structure it would have supported. With 2 towers linked by a double archway, the complete gatehouse stands 23 metres wide. The massive castle-like gate means that soldiers can easily defend this vulnerable point of entry into their fortress. There are 4 of these gatehouses, one on each side, and the fortress itself is vast. Covering 62 acres, it's larger than any other in Britain. This, the fortress of Deva Victrix, is home to 5,500 soldiers. All over the empire, from North Africa to the Middle East, these military bases had the same design. Our aerial archaeologist Ben Robinson has been finding out how the fortress layout still influences Chester today.
Chester is one of the best examples of a Roman fort layout fossilised in today's street pattern. It's incredible. I can make out the rounded corners of this playing card, this rectangular shape of the fort. The other thing that Roman forts have in common is that they're laid out of 2 principal streets, the Via Praetoria and the Via Principalis, and I can see those in Chester. And where they meet, there's a kink, and that's where the headquarters building was. I just find it fascinating that 2,000 years after the Roman surveyors laid all this out, the street pattern in Chester is still dominated by their work. So you don't have to go to Pompeii to walk down streets that are 2,000 years old. You can do it right here in Chester.
As well as those 2 main streets, all Roman fortresses have a standard set of buildings, including barracks for the soldiers, a headquarters or principia, a bathhouse, and plenty of warehouses. The centre of Chester today is the centre of the Roman fortress. The street plan is the same, but I'm keen to find out if anything of the fortress buildings themselves has survived. So apparently, there's a bit of Roman Chester in here. It's difficult to believe. Hello. Can I go and have an explore down in your basement? Is that okay?
Just follow the door, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, it's not just the toilets that are down here, apparently. This is not a place where I would expect to find archaeology. Those are the toilets. I'm not gonna try in there. Let's have a look down here. Oh, look at this! Look at this! Wow! That's amazing! Look at that. We're underneath the cafe, next to the toilets. And there's some pretty monumental Roman architecture down here. This is a carved capital of a really impressive pillar. Now, if I'm where I think we are, we're right in the centre of the fortress. And if we're right in the centre of a Roman fortress, then there should be a set of buildings here that are extremely important indeed. The Principia, the principal buildings, the administrative and religious centre of the fortress. Huge columns would have once stood on these plinths, supporting the roof of a great hall. Each fortress across Britain had its own Principia, from where the legion's commander would give out orders sent by the emperor back in Rome. Where people now sit and sip their cappuccinos, the army once gathered for meetings and held parades. Life for troops was extremely regimented, but even a Roman soldier needed some downtime. To relax, these men enjoyed a form of entertainment brought to Britain from Rome. And the biggest and best example of it is found here in Chester. In 1929, the council decided to build a road right through here. But work was brought to a halt when diggers struck ancient ruins. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a huge building hidden in the ground for almost 2 millennia. What they uncovered suggested that this quiet Cheshire town had once witnessed scenes of indescribable violence and bloodshed. And this is it, Britain's largest amphitheatre. It wasn't until 2004 that the site was properly excavated. And the archaeologist leading that dig was Tony Wilmot.
Hello.
Tony.
Hi.
Hello. The evidence found here gives an incredible insight into just how violent and bloodthirsty Roman entertainment could be, even in this remote corner of the empire. So what went on here? I can imagine Russell Crowe coming into the arena. Were there gladiatorial battles fought here, do you
Yes,
think?
that's what these places were for. I think the principal piece of evidence we've got is over here, this in the centre of the arena. Now, this is not the original that's sitting there. The original we found on the other side of this wall. This would be buried in the sand of the arena with just the loop sticking out. You put a chain on the loop and tie an animal in the middle of the arena to be baited. It could be a bear or something like that.
Animals being baited in the centre of the arena here, what would that actually have meant?
There's a pretty horrific painting in Pompeii which shows a bear and a bull which are chained together with a long chain. And the idea is, you know, they get angry with each other and then fight each other.
It's quite horrific, though, isn't it? I think to modern sensibilities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There have been gladiators fighting the
There
animals?
will be gladiators. The specific class of person in the arena called a venator, a hunter. But, of course, the other thing that did take place was gladiators. Gladiator on gladiator.
And would they stop before anyone was seriously injured, or again, could it be a fight
Sometimes
to the death?
There were fights to the death. An awful lot of the gladiatorial graffiti in Pompeii that show individual fights say that the loser was spared. In fact, most of them. Because a gladiator was a very expensive piece of real estate that you'd given medical treatment to, you'd fed, you'd trained up. On balance, you really didn't want them to be killed. Some of them had to be killed to add a bit of spice to the event, I suppose.
These ruins are incredibly evocative, but Tony has brought something even more extraordinary to show me. What have you got? What have you got?
Well, this was found just over there in 1738. It shows a gladiator.
Wow.
It's a retiarius gladiator, net and
net
trident
carrier,
fighter. And I've only been able to find 2 other examples in the entire Roman Empire of a depiction of a retiarius holding a net.
And he'd have been taking that net then and using that to catch his opponent and then using the trident and stabbing that in.
Also as a flail to beat with lead bits on the end of the ropes. We know from classical literature the net was thrown with the right hand. He's got it in his left hand. He's a left-hander. And it's the only left-handed retiarius I've managed to find in the Roman Empire. So I really do believe that this is a chap whose name was known and who fought here.
That's quite extraordinary, isn't it? That we're looking at a portrait of somebody who was here in Roman Chester and to know what he did.
Yeah.
What else have we got in these boxes then?
So we've got evidence for the behaviour of spectators, effectively. Now, these don't look very prepossessing, but these fragments of what look like tile are fragments of Roman portable oven, a so-called klibanus. And this is a portable oven. So this is evidence for portable cooking facilities, probably being used in these stalls and cooking fast food.
So what would they have cooked in something like that?
They're cooking chicken. We've got a larger proportion of chicken bone than we do almost anywhere else in Roman Britain, statistically speaking.
So you can imagine people sitting in the amphitheatre there, watching the gladiators fighting each other and snacking on chicken drumsticks.
Absolutely you can.
The detailed excavations of the amphitheatre carried out by Tony and his team allow us to accurately reconstruct what the amphitheatre looked like back in the day. Like the Colosseum in Rome, Chester's amphitheatre is oval in shape. And like the Colosseum, its outside is furnished with huge columns. It can seat 8,000 spectators. Of the 14 Roman amphitheatres we know of in Britain, this is by far the largest. It must have been an extraordinary sight, especially for the indigenous Britons. It's quite bizarre to sit here in Chester, imagining what it would have been like nearly 2,000 years ago. People sitting in this amphitheatre, thousands of people, nibbling on their snacks and waiting for the next bit of entertainment, gruesome entertainment. Nice shields.
So, Latin word for left is sinister, the Latin word for right is dextra. We're going to shorten these down to sin and dex, and our chant should go like this. Sin, 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 dex, sin.
Fresh recruits there, ready for the garrison. Fantastic. I'm in search of Roman Britain, and what better town to be in than Chester? The Romans arrived in the 1st century AD, and Britain would be part of the Roman Empire for over 300 years. With that came a new power structure, but also new clothes, new foods, and new gods. When Chester started out, it was just a legionary fortress, but then a civilian settlement grew up around it, the so-called Canabae, with people making the most of the opportunity to trade with the legionaries. And this road leading out of the east gate of the fortress would have been lined with shops and full of shoppers, just as it is today. Settlements or villages like this grew up outside fortress walls all over Britain. By the end of the 2nd century AD, the threat of hostile tribes had diminished, and it appears that the Roman army relaxed the security of its fortresses. The lives of the army and the people of the Canabae became more entwined. Many soldiers had relations with local women, with whom they would raise families. To begin with, these unions weren't officially recognised, and women and children didn't have any rights. But towards the end of the 2nd century, the Emperor Septimus Severus brought in a number of reforms which had profound effects on people's lives. And among them, he allowed soldiers to marry and keep a family home. This corner that we're looking at here would have been barracks, and several objects have been found around here which indicate the presence of females. And I've got some objects here from the Grosvenor Museum here in Chester. So this is a fragment, just a fragment of a jet bracelet. Look at that. You can still see that lovely shine on the jet. And then these are wonderful. These are bone hairpins. So there we go. Women inside the Roman fortress. It was clearly more than just military business going on inside these barrack blocks. But the owners of this jewellery weren't necessarily just the wives or girlfriends of soldiers. At the heart of the empire in Rome, women had very little freedom. But in Britain, at the limits of imperial control, women may have had more liberties. Nowhere is there better evidence of this than Chester, home to the largest collection of tombstones from a single Roman site anywhere in Britain. Etched into these stones are unique details of individuals who lived almost 2,000 years ago. Curator Liz Montgomery is keen to tell me about them. Oh, this is a lovely image. Person reclining on a couch.
That's right, and a woman. Chester was a military fortress. There were lots and lots of soldiers, men here. But we do have tombstones which are dedicated to women, set up to women, or mention women on them.
And what about the inscription then? What does that tell us about this woman?
We have the lady's name, so Curatia Dionysia, going on to the next line.
And is that a common name?
It's slightly unusual for around here. It's a Greek name, suggesting this lady was of Eastern origin. Possibly she was a merchant's wife, or maybe even had some sort of role as a merchant herself, because she was certainly a very wealthy woman to be able to afford to leave money to her heir to have this tombstone made for her.
So tell me what's going on here.
So she's shown here reclining on a banqueting couch. She's holding a cup, presumably wine, ready to toast people who are visiting her. And there's a three-legged stool down here which would have had her food on. Her people who succeeded her wanted to think of her enjoying herself in the afterlife, and they would visit the graves and have banquets with her, just sat and toasted her just like she's toasting them.
It's rather wonderful, isn't it, to think of her family coming and bringing food and sharing that with her.
It is, it's a really nice thought.
All this talk of banquets has made me hungry, and curious about what exactly the Roman Britons would have been eating. Liz has invited me to join her for a Chester Roman banquet. And we've decided to do it in style. When in Rome, as they say, or in Chester. Liz is keen that we keep it authentic, using evidence from archaeology like these pots, as well as historical sources for the recipes.
That's the Roman one?
Yeah, this is an original Roman cooking pot.
We better not get it mixed up with the rest
I
of
know,
Jill's.
I know. Okay, so these are the couches that we're going to recline on to enjoy our banquet.
How do we elegantly get down onto these then?
I've not tried it too many times. I think we just have to go for it. We need to be leaning up on our elbows.
Okay.
And then we can lie and chat to each other while we're enjoying our food.
This is really comfortable.
It is actually
I
quite
could
nice.
get used to this.
Yeah.
While we wait for our food, Liz shows me some wonderful examples of Roman dining ware found right here in Chester.
First thing here is a lovely wine flagon. So this would have been full of nice sorts of wine. Falernian was the best. And this is what you would have drunk it from if you weren't a very rich person. This is a really nice pottery wine cup. You can see just around the outside it's all textured so you didn't drop it and spill any and waste it.
Among the discoveries is the most amazingly delicate glass bowl, still in perfect condition.
This is a really beautiful bowl. We've only got one complete vessel. We've got lots of pieces, but this bowl
So beautiful and it holds such sun. Look at that. Wow. Hey, I wonder how Jill's getting on with dinner.
The food has been prepared using traditional methods and based on real Roman recipes. First course arrives. I'm having melon with mint, and it's chicken and beetroot soup for Liz. I think I've had a lucky escape.
Hang on a minute. Have you ever had chicken and beetroot before?
I haven't, no. Very nice. The beetroot's definitely nice. I'm not sure if I'd put chicken with it next time.
This is melon with mint. That's lovely. Oh, there's more. There's more.
For our second course, we have prawn balls in quite a tasty fish sauce.
That is delicious. So the Romans had fish sauce.
Very definitely, it's one of their favourite condiments. There are different grades of it, and the one we talk about most, I think, is garum, which was fermented fish intestines and blood.
I was quite enjoying it up until that point. Oh, well, it's still delicious.
It still tastes nice.
As we eat our fill of these ancient dishes, it's surprising how contemporary they seem. The Romans introduced and popularised many foods that we now think of as very British, including chicken, cucumber, plums, pears, and even apples.
I'm finding it slightly uncomfortable now, leaning on my elbow. I think my shoulder's seizing up. So, you know, they were really clever, those Romans. They gave us a lot, but they weren't clever enough to invent the dining table.
No.
The Roman influence on ancient Brits was more than just culinary. They also introduced new beliefs.
Now, this isn't actually a Roman bridge, but it is on the site of the original Roman bridge over the River Dee. And much of the stone for this and for the walls themselves would have come from quarries over there.
So that's where I'm headed now, because I'm hoping to find the only Roman shrine still standing in its original site in the whole of Britain.
Well, there's a fantastic play park. My kids would love this.
That's surely got to be her.
Do you think? Oh, this is exciting. Oh, look.
OK, so this is later stonework. This is 19th century, 20th century edition. But this is the original Roman. So, a little bit weathered, but she's just about standing the test of time. It looks as though she's got a spear here, and maybe that's the remains of a shield. It's very tricky to tell, isn't it? Luckily, we have some descriptions from the antiquarians who tell us that they could clearly see that she was carrying a spear and a shield. Not only that, But she had an owl sitting on her shoulder, and the owl is the symbol of Minerva. Now, Minerva was the goddess of wisdom. She was also the goddess of warfare, so she was a protector of soldiers, also a protector of craftspeople. So maybe she was put up by the masons and the quarrymen who worked here.
The Romans brought a whole range of gods and goddesses with them. Some of them seem to have been adopted by the locals alongside their own deities. And who knows, perhaps Minerva was even seen as just another name for the local river goddess Diva. I'm exploring the town of Chester to find out what Britain was like under Roman rule. The Romans came to this country for military glory, but they also had a vast empire to support. They were after resources. To see a great example of this, I'm taking a short drive out of town. I'm heading to Alderley Edge in the Cheshire countryside.
I'm really intrigued to look for some traces of the Romans there, but the archaeology I'm after is still rather deep underground.
The rocks in this area have been mined for their copper ore from the Bronze Age right up to Victorian times. Now, I thought I was going to find evidence of Roman activity here, but I'm slightly concerned I've been brought to the wrong place.
Hang on a minute, this is Barclays Bank night safe.
Yes, there's a story behind that, but I don't know what it is.
It's a good bit of recycling, though. Here we go. Right.
My guides today are Malcolm Bailey and Nigel Dibben from Derbyshire Caving Club. A few years ago, Malcolm found something which transformed our understanding of what the Romans were doing here. In 1995, a crack appeared above ground, revealing a mine shaft 12 metres deep.
So it was up there at the top.
As Malcolm began excavating, he found a vast treasure trove, untouched for nearly 2,000 years.
So what were you doing up there, Malcolm?
I was just clearing out the corner, and there's a line of little green coins.
Oh, wow.
At first I thought they were sixpences. Picked up one of the coins, and then, of course, the archaeologist's nightmare, the bloke who picks up an artefact like that goes and rubs all the evidence off. When I turned it over, I could see that there was a laurel wreath round the head, and instantly I knew it was Roman.
So how many coins were there in total?
564.
Yeah.
Dating from, I think it's 317 to 343 AD.
The reason these coins were here is a mystery. Perhaps they were hastily hidden and then forgotten.
They're beautiful coins. You can read his name, Constantine. And on the other side, yes, look at that lovely she-wolf, and Romulus and Remus suckling underneath us. So the myth of the origin of Rome. Yeah. Stuff down a mine in Cheshire. That's amazing.
The coins were a sign that the Romans had been here and triggered a search for more evidence. At the bottom of the shaft, the cavers unearthed a Roman tunnel.
There's lots of pick marks on the walls here.
Yeah. And the really telling thing is the way they swung down, like in that direction there.
Yeah. So they're making their way in this way.
That's right.
And hacking at the walls like that as they come through.
It's likely that these tunnels were dug by Roman slaves to reach copper ore deposits. Copper was exported all over the empire. Copper alloy was used for coins, cooking pots, horse trappings, jewellery, statues and building projects. But there's something even more exotic down these particular mines.
Wow!
When copper ore comes into contact with water in limestone caves, a very special mineral is produced.
A waterfall of azurite blue. I've been in quite a lot of caves and I've never seen anything quite as stunning as that. These wonderful copper minerals just leaching out of the rock and then being washed down and redeposited by that little waterfall. And what beautiful, beautiful colours. So I think the ancients would have been interested in the colour to begin with. It would have been the first thing they noticed, even before they knew about how to get that copper out of the rock.
The Roman name for this was ceruleum, or deep blue, and they used this mineral pigment to dye clothing, glaze pottery, and paint their homes.
Gorgeous. Imagine that on the walls of your villa.
As I head back to town, there's something that strikes me. I've seen some incredible Roman remains in Chester, but a lot of it is pretty much what you'd expect from the Romans. But there are some oddities. The fortress is larger than you'd think it should be. The wall of it is more ornate. And Chester's got the biggest amphitheatre anywhere in Britain. So, why is so much attention being paid to Chester? Archaeologist David Mason has devoted much of his career to studying Roman Chester, and he thinks he might have the answer. We're meeting at the Roman Gardens, a graveyard of relics from across Chester. When excavating in the city centre in the 60s, David came across a very unusual building that seems never to have been completed. So this is the
outline of the fortress.
Yeah.
So we've got barracks along the rear part of the fortress, barracks down here. That's the main internal bath building, possible hospital, headquarters building there, and then we come to this structure, the so-called elliptical building. It's an unusual design building. It goes right the way back to the earliest years of the fortress's existence. You don't really appreciate what the nature of the building is like until you come out of that end of the passageway and you emerge into this open courtyard, colonnade around it, and behind that you have these massive arched entrances into these 12 chambers. As far as I'm aware, nobody's found a building like it anywhere in the Roman Empire.
So you think this could have been something really special then, a pantheon or a celebration of the Roman Empire?
It's such an extravagance in what otherwise is such a utilitarian, construction. It's got to be something special.
An important clue emerged when a lead pipe was discovered bearing the name of the governor of Roman Britain.
It seems to me that there's only one authority that could have ordered a collection of buildings like this to be inserted, if you like, into the centre of a normal legionary fortress plan, and that would be the provincial governor, which was Gnaeus Julius Agricola.
If this was commissioned by a governor, and that's what it looks like, do you think it was possibly also commissioned to be the seat of a governor, where the governor was intended to live?
Indeed. It would seem so.
So there's something really peculiar about Roman Chester. You've got a very big fortress, you've got a supersized amphitheatre, you've got this strange elliptical building. What's going on?
I think you put all those things together and Chester was intended to be the capital of Roman Britain.
Oh, how extraordinary. Things could have been very different.
Indeed.
It's an astonishing thought. If David's theory is correct, Chester would have become the most important town in Britain. But David believes the Roman plans went even further. What's crucial here is the position of Chester's harbour at the northwest tip of the Roman Empire. Its fleet looked out beyond the limits of the empire to unconquered Ireland.
Contingency plans have clearly been made for the conquest of Ireland as well. So when you think of Chester's geographical location, centrally placed, port on the Irish Sea, to be the capital of a sort of Greater Britannia. And then for whatever reason, partway through AD 79, the whole thing is put on hold and it's never carried through to completion.
And Ireland is never invaded?
The evidence would say no.
Ultimately, the Roman Empire's desire for conquest and expansion seems to have been its undoing. By the end of the 4th century, it faced increasing rebellions, and in 409 AD, Roman troops were withdrawn from Britain. The era of Roman Britain was over. But its legacy would last far longer than any empire, and nowhere is that more true than in Chester. Whether or not there were ever any actual plans to make this the headquarters of the governor of Britain, there's absolutely no doubt that Chester flourished under the Romans. And what's incredible is when you walk around the city today, so much of that legacy is still visible.
The wealth of remains here transports us back nearly 2,000 years to when Chester has its own enormous amphitheatre, a huge port receiving ships from across the empire, and a fortress larger than any other in Britain. Putting all the pieces together, we're taken back to a time when Chester, or Deva, stood guard at the northwest tip of the Roman Empire.
And that, for me, is why Chester is Britain's most Roman town.